Welcome everyone. I am Kathleen McMahon, and I'm here today to talk about Bye-Bye Weeds, digital gardening with Astro, SolidJS, and MDX. Before we begin, let's get some details out of the way. My slides will be posted sometime after the talk at Resource 11, that's Resource11 at Twitter. And you can follow me at Resource 11 at Twitter, Instagram, and GitHub. And I'm making sure I'm using the right clicker. Nope, I am using the right way. Okay. Oh, I went backwards. There we go. I wanted to thank you, organizers. I was going backwards. My slides are looping. So I want to thank the organizers for your patience today with the kerfuffle of my technology. But I want to thank the organizers, the volunteers, and everyone at ReactNext for having me and for putting on a fantastic event, that first. And that's where you're going to be able to find my deck later on, https://noti.st/resource11. And I'll post the full URL on Twitter as well. And like I said before, this is where you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and GitHub. I'm going to back up so I can introduce myself a bit better. I'm Kathleen McMahon. I'm an engineer, designer. I like to speak about things. I occasionally race cyclocross very badly, mostly in costume. With everyone laughing at me, holding beers. I wear my costumes backwards. I love lights. I go to the beach, and I collect sand dollars. It's literally the Where's Waldo of the beach. I love my cats, Thor and Otis. I collect a ridiculous amount of crystals. You don't want to know how many I have in my closets at this point. And I try to get good photos of them, but Otis interferes often and has really a lot of opinions about it. He does not like me to take photos, as you can see. He wants all the attention. And now Thor has learned to do the same with my sand dollars. He's very satisfied with himself now, but I can't resist my boys. I'm also a senior design systems engineer at Northwestern Mutual, working on the Luna design system. And I love design systems. It's exciting work, especially if you like herding kittens. It's always fun with lots of moving parts. Part of design systems work involves trying out new software, new software stocks, and choosing the best tool for your system, like Gatsby. So, and speaking of Gatsby, that's what I originally chose to build my digital garden site, KathleenMcMahon.dev, back in 2020. And you're like, what is a digital garden? So this blog post by Joel Hooks, who, if you've ever heard of Egghead.io, that education site, that's his company. And he wrote this blog post about his blog made Digital Garden. And one of the quotes that really I like is, what makes a garden is interesting. It's personal. Things are organized, but with a touch of chaos around the edges. And I latched onto that idea of creating a digital garden and using Gatsby and MDX as my stack for a few reasons. One, because I tend to love trying all the things. All the time, all at once. And I struggle personally with seeking progress over perfection, like getting things done. And if I'm not careful, I lean towards making big Lexus bows versus tiny kitten bows. So, like in that very perfect software thing, and you're making every little package and everything all done before I ship it, to the consternation of every single engineering director. It's like, can you just ship it? Just a little thing. just a tiny little kitten bow. So I'm learning how to do tiny kitten bows. So anyway, yeah, I can really hyper-focus on those details. But the digital garden format keeps me in that kitten bow mindset. And that way, progress happens, blog post gets written, things get shipped. So when you do a garden, if anyone here is a gardener, you know that if you don't take care of your garden, weeds will come in, right? So yeah, you need to take care of that garden. So fast forward a few years, things get busy. And the only thing I'm doing with my digital garden, which that's the point of digital gardens, is like, they can get weedy. It's the point, and it's cool. All I've been doing is like maybe updating a talk, updating like a package vulnerability, something like that. Nothing else much changed. But randomly, I noticed like last fall that I'm like, hey, Gatsby's up to 5.3. My site's at Gatsby 2.3. Maybe I should take some time to upgrade. And I asked an industry colleague familiar with Gatsby who like works on it a lot. It's like, so you might, I already knew the answer, but I'm like, so how painful it will be to like upgrade 3 versions at once. What do you think? And after hearing some feedback that I expected, he also said things like, you really should be updating your JavaScript more often. And, JavaScript's hard, right? And maybe you should make a, Squarespace sites to show off your skill set. Which, like, wait, portfolio site, showing my skills so I can get hired. Doesn't make sense. So I did some spite-driven development because by golly, you told me I couldn't, so therefore I will. And Squarespace my butt. So, yeah. I put my nose back in place and got to work, and 10 hours later, still shaking my head about that. I come up from air and realized, okay, well, I figured out the whole like GraphQL API has changed. I figured out all my queries have changed. I fixed those. And then I was wrestling with the Gatsby image API, and I'm like, okay. Now everything's like, Gatsby image? You want me to change this too? Why am I doing this? Like, why am I literally changing all this stuff? Like, what kind of a decision am I making? Like, it's literally fish and jello. It's just not appealing. I mean, I have a 4-page static site, and I'm like trying to use Gatsby to shove all this JavaScript to render a static site. And I was doing Gatsby before to say, hey, Gatsby's cool. Gatsby's awesome. Gatsby's a static site generator. And everyone's doing it because it's 2020 and everyone's like, Gatsby, awesome. But now it's like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I using all this JavaScript, a JavaScript framework to render 4 static pages in a blog? So, and why am I using JSX to create HTML when I could write HTML? Now, granted, I work on design systems. I love React. I love creating components. I love creating components all day. I love creating every single kind of composed component with the React props and all the things that you could make anything flexible. So I'm the last person to say, just throw it all out. But there are times where you're like, I make a 4-page site. Why am I going to throw all this JavaScript at it? Just to render something that's, small, lean, performant, and just doesn't need to be a spa. It needs to be a multi-page app. I mean, I literally don't need a suite of Combine machines. And that's what Gatsby had become. because in 2020 it wasn't. And now Gatsby has evolved into this literally an industrial suite of farming equipment. And all I need is a hoe and rake to get my stuff done. So it was time to weed out the complexity. So all right, what am I going to do? And I'm like, all right, let's choose a new framework. Which one will I do? Because I want to compile right down to HTML, CSS, and only serve the minimal amount of JavaScript if I need it. Only if I need it, by evaluating what I have in my site. So looked around, and because there's a bunch out there, but of course, me, sucker for all the things. Oh, hi, Astro. Let's take a look at you. And so it's kind of nice because I can add all my MDX support right away. Like all my MDX pages, I can bring them right over. That is super cool. Like, I don't have to change any of that. I can bring all my CSS over. I can bring all that stuff over. Also, it supports Astro Islands, which is like an interactive islands. So if I don't want to convert any of my React components that I have from Gatsby, I don't have to. I can convert them one at a time into Astro components. So it's like I can gradually convert my site over into an Astro site. Like a one-to-one thing. One-to-one comparison. And that's really, really nice. And that means that you could have a whole static site, or you can have parts that have like partial and selective hydration on the site, and it's really nice. And you can like mix different frameworks and limit different islands on your site, so you can try different frameworks before you buy. Literally. So you don't have to like say, I want to try Vue, all of this. But you could like do one island and just like, I just want to try Vue out for just a little bit. Or Svelte out just for a little bit. And you can do that without having to fully commit. So it's pretty nice. And the configs are much leaner. I mean, here's Gatsby's config versus on the left versus Astro's config on the right. So, Gatsby is like all your post CSS configs, site metadata, everything else. On the right, it's like, oh, I want React Solid MDX. And, supporting like some integrations, whether I want some assets for, experimental assets, the image assets, or any support. I mean, literally, that's the config. And the Gatsby config keeps going and going and going and going. And here's the one for Node. So for creating nodes, because I didn't want to have my blog post under the source folder. I want to have my blog post in a separate blog post folder so I could be really fancy in Gatsby. Of like, no, I don't want to be over under the source folder. I want to be over here where I could like generate blog posts in a separate folder with these directories and be all fun and fancy and look at how smart I am. Look at me. That's what I did over in Gatsby. And I had to create all these nodes, in the node file and do GraphQL queries to make the absolute pass, to create the posts with, awesome, fun. So Gatsby node and all the GraphQL and a Gatsby browser with this wrap root element so I could, wrap components and pass all these components into MDX all at once. So that way I could just render all my components like nice, pretty way in MDX without having to like style them. But yeah, you can try out all these different frameworks. So the difference between React and Astro, there's like some very small differences. React components have children, Astro have slots. Like page context is gone. We have Astro layouts, and I would like to, I don't know where that guy went. I would like to show a side-by-side of like my Gatsby repo versus the other repo, because I could like dig in and point out some of the, the configs and the differences here, because like at this point I do have like just single pages, and I want to show you like some of the new things about like the content collections and the images. And I'm going to try it now, but I don't know where he is because we have 15 minutes left. And I'm going to like slowly dance over here and see if I can get his attention and try it. But we have an extended desktop, so I'm going to try it. Let's see if I'm going to get bold. Okay, so I want to show you a couple of things that are fancy and good, and because my eyes sometimes work and sometimes they don't. I want to show you some things that I learned. And also, I'm going to also move over some things and be also bold and So first I'm going to show some stuff on the site. I'm going to point some stuff out and let me do this. This is the site running locally, okay? I'm going to show you some interesting things. This is the site running locally. This is the site deployed as a Netlified app. And I want to show you some little differences that I've learned. Because part of this is like the things I learned from playing with Astro, the things that I wrestled with from learning Astro, like converting components, like converting a React and a Gatsby link to an Astro link because I wanted it to stay as a React link. And for the life of me, I couldn't keep it that way. I didn't want to make it an Astro link. I was very stubborn. I didn't want to do it because I wanted to keep my icon component. I wanted my React, my font awesome icon component. I didn't want to let it go. And for a week, I didn't want to let it go. And finally, I did let it go for an Astro icon component. And it was beautiful. But for a week, it did not work. And for that week, everything was chaos. So this one here, I'm going to stand and look. One on the left is the actual deployed Gatsby site. The one in the middle is the deployed Astro site. Look at some of the CSS funkiness, right? And then the one on the right is the local Astro site. Now, the viewports are a little bit different, so they're not fully catching all the viewport loveliness. Almost there, but close. There we go. So it's almost a one-to-one mapping. But notice here, this is one thing I learned about Astro. So Astro allows you to do a few things, like with CSS, like you can do Tailwind if you love Tailwind. You can do scope styles, like, if you want to do post CSS, it loves post CSS. It's amazing. You can do those inline styles at the bottom of each file where you can do like a style tag and have the scope that way, which it's nice, but for me, I don't like it because then I can't like share a file anywhere else. But what I learned is if you have like if you're a component library author and you have like a CSS file and you're very generic with your names, like you call your class root, scoping, specificity, clashes, cause chaos because load order. And even if you load a CSS file in the wrong way, it even conflicts with when you load an Astro file in the wrong order. It will actually compile your code and mess up your CSS. So if I imported an Astro file after CSS, it would compile the Astro file CSS after the CSS of the file that I was loading. It was really weird and funky. So if you see on the right here, where locally I'm like, oh, everything looks fine, and I deployed over here, what happened here is in Astro, you can do this dynamically generate routes for your Markdown and MDX pages, and it's glorious and it's magical. And you create this page called like square brackets .. slug Astro, and I can show you that. And it's great, but when it compiles, that is the first CSS file that loads. And that CSS file has an underscore attached to it. And since it's an underscore attached to the CSS file, it loads first. And so it overwrites everything else. So that's one thing I learned. But let me show you some more things. That was the first thing I learned. But let's actually show you some code rather than like the CSS I learned. Because you want to see code. I want to show you content collections. I want to show you images because from what I understand, a lot of people, well, content collections has been fairly new with Astro as of version 2.0. And there's this experimental image integration that has dropped recently that is replacing the other image integration, which is pretty wild, actually. And it's behind a flag. And it's pretty stable. And it's going to be, the flag is going to be dropped and like released into the like production as of Astro version 3, which is going to drop in the fall. And I've been playing with it. It's really nice. What you can do, let me show you here. Let me find the file. Kathleen McMahon.dev. It is, let's look at the page. I want to look at the index page because I'm dynamically generating. This is a really good page because on the home page, what I'm doing is a lot on styles. On the home page, 7 minutes. So I'm going to show you this one thing. And I'm not going to compare it with Gatsby because right now I want to focus on Astro for y'all. So in my index Astro file, up here, there is this image, like it's an image component from the Astro assets thing in Astro. And what this means is you can put all your images that you want to use, well, other than SVGs, because this image component doesn't support SVGs, because it's optimizing your images. And it's going to optimize your images and serve them up as WebP format, which is really nice. And eventually, I think they're going to try to serve them up also as AVIF format later. But right now, they serve them up as WebP format. And what's nice about this is you can take all your images, rather than putting them in this public folder, you can put them in this assets folder here, right? Just drop them in here. And so, I mean, like technically, you could just import your images here and literally write like import image from path, like image, like source / assets image name in quotes. And then you do image, image source equals this, and then width and height. And then it renders it for you. It adds the lazy loading, like the rel is prefetch, like all those optimizations for you, like all the stuff under the hood to make it good. It also will do it for MDX, which is really, really nice. So you can drop that image component right in MDX and it makes it really beautiful, which is on one of my pages. I can show you that. But what's really nice about this is you can take that and you can take this image component and you can combine it with Astro's Content Collections API, which the Content Collections API allows you to, 436. The Content Collections API allows you to host content, like right here, like this is all your blog content This is like YAML content. I have YAML content in here. And what I have in there is I have a path to this content here, and it's pointing to an Astro like TypeScript definition. And what's nice about this is I can, as long as I am following the schema that I have set up for my content collections, because Astro allows you to set up type-safe schemas in your content collections now using Zod. So you, like me, if you get spacey in your front matter, you can set up content collections for your blog schemas and everything else to make sure when you were writing your front matter for every single MDX page that you were writing the correct front matter every time. So when you write a new front matter, block in every single MDX page or MD page, you're not missing something. Because if it doesn't, Zod will yell at you. And when I was transcribing this, it transcribed God will yell at you. So God will yell at you if you do your schema wrong. If you define your schema wrong. But what I noticed was I was having problems rendering images using type-safe definitions. And I was like, what the heck? Because the old definition for the image definition for schemas, you'd have to do a source equals image.source. And the image path was a string. So when you were doing a type definition, you'd be like image string. And it's like, well, what's going on? I was defining my image down here, my image as a string. But what we discovered here, in order to render an image in dynamically generated routes, which was this schema is in combination with the content collection that is combined with this get static paths function, you have to pass in this destructured image variable in here and wrap it in a function and pass it in to your image key. And that will allow you to render images in your schema here. And this is how you can dynamically render images if you're passing it in from a YAML file. So you don't have to keep on importing images one at a time in a file. You can actually define your schema and pass in this image function. And even though it says it's lowercase, it's working with the new Image Assets API, that capital I, that has the optimization for WebP. So the new Rockin Image API, the new modern one that they are developing and keep on expanding and making nice. So it's rad. And since I have 1 minute left, what I'm going to do is jump really fast back to this index file and show you, while I was doing the get collection and get entry, what I was talking about was when you're grabbing your collections to render your files in a map down in any list or whatever to grab your collection, you have to get, and also Astro files use TypeScript props. You can do define interface props for types Astro files, which is awesome. But up here, you can do get static paths and do an async await get collection and map your data and get your parameters for your front matter slug and get your data and use that to create the data object to pass down from your content collection to map into whatever you need to map in your HTML. So it's pretty powerful to combine your content collections, getting static paths, and the image component. So those are the three most powerful things that I learned from working with Astro. And if you notice, and I'm 12 seconds over, the one thing that I did not have in this talk yet is solid. And that's on purpose, because I looked at every single one of my components, and there's only one that technically could be a solid component, and that is the form component on my About page. And that is a format component, because I could make that an HTML component, But I literally do not want to do form validation. So there is a form equivalent in Solid. So I'm going to go back and grab that and make a conversion, because you can convert Solid. You can convert React component to Solid. And I made the decision that it wasn't worth the risk to do that. So everything here logistically could be created with Astro and not Solid, because there was no state or use effect in my components to warrant using Solid other than in Formic. So I hope it at least encourages you to give Astro a try, to just play around with it. And that's all I got.